I woke up to find an Apache woman in my room. She said, "It's just for one night." The morning started like any other. The rancher, a young man in his late 20s, slowly opened his eyes to the soft light spilling through the window. The smell of fresh hay and the distant sound of horses in the paddock greeted him. He rubbed his eyes and yawned, expecting the usual quietness of his small home. But something felt different that day, though he couldn't yet name what it was. He swung his legs off the bed and stretched, noticing a faint shadow near the corner of his room. He froze, his heart beating a little faster. It wasn't the shadow of a curtain or his own reflection. It moved, slowly. He blinked a few times, thinking he must still be half asleep. Then he saw her. Sitting calmly on the edge of his old wooden chair was a woman he had never seen before. She didn't make a sound. Her long black hair fell over her shoulders, and her eyes were steady, almost piercing. She was quiet, but there was a strength in her presence that made the room feel different. The rancher instinctively took a step back. Who are you?" he asked, his voice a mix of shock and caution. The woman looked up at him and smiled faintly, not in a teasing way, but in a calm, almost sad way. "It's just for one night," she said quietly. He froze. "What?" "What do you mean?" She didn't immediately answer. She just watched him, her eyes full of a strange mix of apology and determination. He could feel that she wasn't there to harm him, but he didn't know why she had chosen his home, of all places. The rancher's mind raced. Who was she? How did she get in? Why was she in his room so early in the morning? He was someone used to handling animals and land, not unexpected visitors. Yet, there was something about her that made him hesitate before acting. "You don't need to be afraid," she said gently, noticing the tension in his body. "I won't stay long. I promise. I just needed a safe place for the night." The rancher looked around. The doors were all closed, and there were no signs of forced entry. It didn't make sense, but when he looked back at her, he saw the truth in her eyes. She wasn't lying. She wasn't trying to trick him. "Safe place?" he repeated, still cautious. "From what?" Her eyes flicked to the window, then back to him. "From danger," she said simply. "There are things on the road that are better avoided. It won't last. Just tonight." It didn't know what to say. His instincts told him to call someone, to send her away. But another part of him, a part that had grown up in this town helping neighbors and strangers alike, hesitated. He had a sense that turning her away might put her in real danger. And somehow, the way she spoke, with no arrogance or demand, made it feel almost impossible to refuse. He took a deep breath. "All right," he said finally. "You can stay, but just for the night. After that, you'll have to leave." She nodded, a small smile appearing on her lips. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was soft but confident, as if she understood rules and yet trusted people to respect them. The rancher turned away to give himself a moment to think, but he could feel her eyes on him. She wasn't staring in a rude way, just observing, waiting. He noticed the way she seemed aware of everything in the room, careful not to disturb anything. She was polite, respectful, and yet there was a quiet strength in her presence that made him uneasy and curious at the same time. He decided to make some tea, figuring it would calm both of them. As he moved around the small kitchen, he heard her shift in the room behind him. He didn't look, but he could feel her presence. There was something almost peaceful about it, as if her calmness was slowly pushing away his initial tension. When he returned with the tea, he found her standing near the window looking outside. "You're quiet," he said. She turned slightly. "I've had to be," she replied. "On the road, making noise can bring trouble." He nodded, understanding more than he expected. Life on a ranch taught him about respect for space, patience, and observing signs. He sensed she had traveled far, and her caution was natural, not forced. They sat in silence for a while, the only sounds the faint clatter of dishes and the soft wind outside. It was strange to share his home with a stranger, but he couldn't deny he felt a mix of curiosity and concern. There was a story behind her eyes, and he wanted to know it, but he also knew it wasn't the right time to ask too many questions. Finally, he spoke. "I don't even know your name," he said. "Names?" She paused, thinking. "Names are for people who stay. Mine is Ayita." He repeated it slowly, letting it sink in. "Ayita, that's a beautiful name." She smiled faintly again, but it didn't reach her eyes completely. There was a shadow there, a hint of worry, but it wasn't aimed at him. It was something else, something larger, outside his home. They spent the morning talking, carefully, cautiously. He asked simple questions about where she came from, what brought her here. She answered in short sentences, honest but careful. She didn't share too much at once, but he could see pieces of her story emerging. Her connection to her people, her respect for tradition, and a life spent moving through challenges. Hours passed, but it didn't feel long. For the rancher, every moment was strange and new. The presence of another person in his home, someone so different from anyone he had known, was both unsettling and fascinating. He found himself listening more than speaking, intrigued by her quiet confidence. When noon arrived, she didn't seem to plan on leaving yet. He realized that despite agreeing she would stay only for one night, he was already imagining the moment he would have to send her away. The thought made him uneasy. Over lunch, they shared a simple meal. He offered what he had: bread, cheese, and some fruit. She accepted with gratitude but did not seem to expect anything more. There was humility in her manners, but also a pride that couldn't be ignored. After the meal, she wandered around the room slowly, observing small things. "You take good care of this place," she said quietly. He smiled. "It's home. I've lived here all my life. There's not much, but it's mine." She nodded, and for a moment there was silence between them. It wasn't awkward. It felt like the quiet that happens when two people understand each other without words. Then, without warning, she spoke about something that caught him off guard. "There are dangers outside that you don't see," she said. "Things that can hurt people without warning. That's why I needed to be here, just for tonight." He felt a chill, though he didn't know why. He trusted her enough to let her stay, but her words hinted at a larger world he had never considered. Out there, beyond his small town and his safe ranch, there were problems he couldn't control. And she had faced them. Even with all his questions, he found himself listening more than questioning. There was a presence about her, something that demanded respect and attention without asking for it. He felt both protective and curious, unsure what to do with the feelings that were slowly growing inside him. By late afternoon, the sun was beginning to lower, and the shadows in the room grew longer. He found himself glancing at her more often than he realized. She was quiet, reading a small book she had found in his room, her expression calm and thoughtful. He admired the way she carried herself, the patience and quiet strength she showed. It was almost impossible to believe that just hours ago he had woken to find a stranger in his room. And yet now, it felt as if her presence belonged there, if only for the moment. As evening approached, the thought of the night to come made him uneasy. What would happen when darkness fully settled outside? Would she be safe? Would he know the right thing to do? He had spent his life caring for animals and the land, but caring for another human being, especially a stranger, was a different challenge altogether. Night fell, and the room was lit only by a small lamp. He could see her silhouette, calm and still, watching the shadows play on the walls. He wondered what thoughts were running through her mind, what memories she carried from the road, and how she had ended up in his home on this night. The rancher knew one thing for certain: this night would change him. Somehow, having Aida in his home, even just for a few hours, was already leaving a mark. He didn't understand it yet, but he knew it would not be forgotten. And in the quiet of the night, with only the soft wind and distant animals for company, he realized that sometimes the most unexpected events could bring lessons, challenges, and connections that stayed for a lifetime. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He didn't know what challenges awaited outside his door. But for now, he had made a choice to trust, and sometimes Trust was the first step toward understanding, the first step toward change. And so, the night began. The night settled over the ranch like a soft blanket. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves, and somewhere in the distance a horse neighed. Inside, the rancher and Aida sat in the living room, the lamp casting a warm glow over the wooden floor and the simple furniture. For a moment, neither spoke. The quiet was not uncomfortable. It was a quiet that allowed thoughts to settle, that let the reality of the day sink in. Aida finally broke the silence. "I have traveled far," she said softly. Her voice was calm, but there was a weight behind it. "It is not easy to move from one place to another when you carry responsibility. You understand what I mean?" The rancher nodded slowly. He had never traveled far himself, but he understood responsibility. The land, the animals, the routines of life. They demanded attention, patience, and care. He could see that she carried the same kind of burden, though it was different from his own. "What kind of responsibility?" he asked, curious, trying to balance caution with interest. Aida's eyes seemed to drift somewhere far away, as if she was thinking of a place he could not see. "For my family, my people, and for myself," she said finally. "Sometimes we must make choices that are not easy, choices that take us far from home." He stayed quiet, letting her words sink in. He could feel the honesty in them. She was not looking for sympathy, and she was not asking for anything. She was simply explaining slowly, as if she trusted him enough to share a small part of her story. "Why here?" he asked, pointing around his modest home. "Why this place?" Aida glanced around, her eyes briefly taking in the walls, the furniture, the little things that made his home unique. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "we choose places that feel safe, even if we do not know the people who live there. Something about this place, it felt safe." He felt a strange warmth at her words. No one had ever chosen his home for safety before. Usually it was just his own life, the animals, and the land. But tonight, someone else had trusted him without asking for anything in return. They sat together in silence for a while, listening to the wind outside. The rancher felt an unexpected calmness. He had thought he would be anxious all night, but there was something about Aida's presence that made him feel grounded. He could see her strength, the way she carried herself, and he felt a mix of admiration and curiosity.
"I have seen many roads," Aida continued after a while, her voice almost a whisper.
"Some are safe, some are dangerous. You learn to be careful, to watch, to listen." He nodded. "I understand. Out here you have to be careful too. Not everything is safe on the ranch, even if it looks quiet." She smiled faintly, a small expression that seemed almost shy. "Yes. That is why I needed a safe place tonight. A place where I could rest without fear." The rancher realized that she was not exaggerating. He had been in this area all his life, and he knew how quickly things could turn dangerous. Weather, animals, even people with bad intentions could change a peaceful night into a difficult one. And Aida, traveling alone, had faced dangers he could only imagine.
"I can make some food if you want," he said, standing up. "It's simple, but it will be something warm."
Aida shook her head. "No, thank you. I do not want to be a burden. Just having a place to rest is enough." He smiled at her reply. There was no pride in her words, no expectation. She simply appreciated what was offered, and that made him respect her even more. He decided not to press the issue, letting her rest while he prepared a small plate of food for himself. Later, he brought the plate back to the living room and sat across from her. "Do you want to talk?" he asked cautiously. "About your journey or your people, if you are comfortable." Aida looked at him, her eyes thoughtful.
"I will tell you a little," she said finally, "but only a little."
"Some things are private, and some things are not easy to explain." He nodded, understanding. "I will listen, and I will not ask more than you want to share." She took a deep breath and began slowly. "I come from a community that values family, respect, and tradition. We live close to the land, and we take care of each other. But sometimes, life forces us to leave, to travel, to face dangers we do not choose. He listened, fascinated. Her words painted a picture of a life very different from his own, yet he could see the similarities. Care for others, responsibility, and courage were universal, no matter where someone came from. I have traveled alone because I must, she continued.
It is not easy. People judge, people doubt, people do not understand.
But I have learned to be strong. I have learned to watch, to listen, to trust only when it is safe. The rancher felt a deep respect for her. He could sense the courage it took to be alone on the road, to face unknown dangers, and to carry responsibilities that most people would never see. He realized that this brief encounter was giving him a chance to understand a world far beyond his own. Hours passed, but they did not feel long. They talked quietly, about small things, how to tell the weather from the clouds, how to find safe places to rest, how to care for animals. She shared tips and knowledge that were practical and wise, and he shared stories from his life on the ranch. Through the conversation, he began to feel a bond forming. Not a romantic bond, not yet, but a human connection built on trust, respect, and understanding. He realized that sometimes the people you meet unexpectedly can teach you the most. At one point, Aida grew quiet, her eyes distant. The rancher noticed, but he did not press her. He simply waited, knowing that silence could be as meaningful as words. After a while, she spoke again. There are moments, she said softly, when you meet someone, and you feel that trust is possible, even if the world around you is not safe. Tonight, I feel that. He felt the weight of her words. It was true, he did feel it too. There was something about this night, about her presence, that made him realize life could offer unexpected lessons. He felt gratitude, curiosity, and a quiet admiration for someone so different from him, yet so similar in courage and spirit. They shared a simple meal together, sitting across from each other at the small table. The conversation continued, gentle and respectful, filled with questions and answers, stories and reflections. Time seemed to slow, and the night stretched comfortably around them. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. Inside, the lamp flickered softly, casting shadows that danced on the walls. The rancher felt that for the first time in a long time, he was truly listening, not just hearing words, but understanding the life behind them. Aida's presence was calming, but it also brought a quiet excitement. He realized that this night was unlike any other. He did not know what would happen when morning came, but he wanted to respect her journey, her courage, and her trust. As the night deepened, they settled into a routine. He read a little, she read a little. They shared small stories, laughed quietly at minor misadventures, and listened to the sounds of the night. It was a simple night, yet it carried a significance he could not fully explain. Eventually, the rancher stood and looked out the window. The stars were bright, and the moonlight painted the field silver. He felt a strange sense of peace, knowing that tonight a stranger had become a companion, if only briefly. Aida rose as well. She moved gracefully, careful not to disturb anything. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice filled with sincerity.
For listening.
"For letting me stay, for understanding, even if just a little." He nodded. "You are welcome," he said. "It is not often someone trusts me like this. I respect that." They returned to their seats, the night stretching on. The rancher realized that while the night was temporary, the lessons and the connection would last far beyond a few hours. There was something timeless about human connection, about understanding another person's journey, even if only a fragment of it. Hours passed, and the rancher noticed that he was no longer anxious. He felt calm, aware, and grateful. The world outside might be unpredictable, dangerous even, but inside this small home there was safety, respect, and trust. Aida spoke softly about her travels, the lessons she had learned, and the people she had met along the way. He listened, amazed at her resilience and wisdom. She did not speak to impress him or seek attention. She spoke because it was part of who she was. The night grew deeper, and finally they sat quietly, not needing words to fill the room. The lamp flickered gently, and the sound of the wind outside became a rhythm, almost comforting. The rancher felt that something important had begun, a connection that could not be broken easily, even if tomorrow they returned to their separate lives. He realized that trust was not given lightly, and tonight it had been offered to him. He knew that he must honor it, not just with words, but with actions, with understanding, and with patience. And so, the night passed, quiet, gentle, meaningful. Two people, strangers yet connected, sharing a small part of life, building trust, and learning that sometimes the most unexpected moments leave the deepest impressions. When the first light of dawn hinted at the horizon, the rancher knew that the night had changed him. It had been a night of stories, lessons, and quiet understanding. And as he watched Aida rest peacefully, he realized that some connections, brief as they may be, could shape a lifetime. Morning arrived slowly over the ranch, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and gold. The rancher woke to the sound of birds singing in the trees, the smell of fresh dew on the grass drifting through the open window. He stirred, expecting another ordinary day, but the memory of last night made him pause. Aida was still there, sitting quietly in the corner of the living room, her eyes focused on something outside. He felt a strange mix of relief and unease. The night had been calm and full of understanding, yet the morning brought the reality of her leaving. He knew it could not last forever, and yet he could not help feeling a sense of loss before the day had even begun. Aida turned her head slightly as he entered the room, her expression calm but thoughtful. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice carrying the same quiet strength as the night before. "Good morning," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes," she said. "For the first time in many nights I felt safe. That is why I am grateful." He nodded. Her words made him realize how rare moments of safety and trust could be in a life spent moving from one place to another. He felt a deep respect for her, and for the courage it took to travel alone. Breakfast was simple, a few eggs and bread warmed over the stove. They ate quietly, sharing small smiles but little conversation. Both seemed to understand that this morning carried a weight, a knowledge that their time together was temporary. After breakfast, Aida stood and stretched. "I should leave soon," she said quietly. "The road will not wait, and there are things I must do. But I wanted to speak with you before I go." The rancher felt a lump in his throat. I understand," he said. "But I want to know more about you before you leave, about your journey, your people, whatever you can share." She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes thoughtful. "I can share some things," she said finally. "But not everything. Some things are private, and some things are dangerous if they are spoken aloud." He nodded, respecting her boundaries. "I only want to understand, not to interfere," he said. Aida took a deep breath. "I have traveled far from my community through lands that are not always safe. I have learned to be careful, to watch for danger, and to trust only when it feels right. I have seen people who helped and people who would do harm, and I have learned that life is a balance of courage and caution." The rancher listened intently. Her words painted a vivid picture of her life, a life of resilience and quiet strength. He realized that the journey she had undertaken required more than physical endurance. It required wisdom, patience, and the ability to understand human nature. "Why do you travel alone?" he asked, curious. "Wouldn't it be safer with others?" Aida shook her head. "Sometimes traveling with others brings risks. Sometimes it is safer to move quietly, alone, and to rely on your own judgment. I have learned to trust my instincts, and that has kept me safe more than anything else." He admired her even more. The world outside his ranch was vast and unpredictable, and yet she navigated it with confidence and awareness. He felt humbled by her strength and inspired by her courage. For a while they sat in silence, listening to the sounds of the morning. The wind rustled through the trees, the horses neighed in the distance, and the rancher could feel the weight of the moment. Aida's presence had changed the atmosphere of the house. It was no longer just a simple ranch home. It was a place of trust, understanding, and connection. Finally, he spoke. "I don't know what tomorrow will bring," he said quietly, "but I want you to know that you are welcome here. Even if it is just for a short time, you have my trust."
Aita looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mix of gratitude and something deeper.
"Thank you," she said softly. "It is rare to find someone who understands, even briefly. I will remember this night, this morning, and your kindness." There was a pause, a quiet moment where words seemed unnecessary. The rancher realized that sometimes connections are not measured by time but by understanding. In a single night, he had learned more about courage, trust, and human resilience than he had in years of routine life on the ranch. As the morning progressed, Aita prepared to leave. She gathered her small belongings, carefully packing them into a worn leather bag. The rancher offered to help, but she shook her head. "I must do this myself," she said. "It is part of the journey." He watched her, feeling a strange mixture of admiration and reluctance. He wanted to ask her to stay, to remain in this safe space for longer, but he knew that was not his place. She had her own path to follow, and he could only support her from where he stood. Before leaving, she turned to him. "There is something I must tell you," she said, her voice serious. "The road ahead is not easy. There are challenges, and not everyone will understand why I travel or what I do. But I have learned to face these challenges with courage. And now, I hope you can understand that courage is not about being fearless, but about moving forward even when fear is present." He nodded, absorbing her words. They carried a truth that resonated deeply. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was the decision to act despite it. He realized that her presence had taught him more than he had expected, and he felt a quiet determination to carry that lesson forward in his own life. They stepped outside together, the morning sun warming their faces. The rancher showed her the path leading to the road, a simple dirt trail winding through fields and trees. He could see the determination in her eyes, the quiet strength that had guided her through countless challenges. "Take care," he said finally. "May your journey be safe." Aita nodded, her eyes meeting his. "And you?" she said. "May you continue to find trust, courage, and understanding in your life. Remember that even brief connections can teach lasting lessons." With that, she turned and walked down the path, her figure growing smaller with each step. The rancher watched her go, feeling a mix of pride, concern, and admiration. He knew that the road ahead would not be easy for her, but he also knew that she carried the strength to face whatever came her way. As she disappeared from view, he felt a quiet emptiness. The house, once filled with the presence of another, seemed still and ordinary again. But he also felt a sense of growth, a recognition that life sometimes offers unexpected lessons in the most unlikely ways. He returned inside, reflecting on the night and the morning. Aita had been more than a visitor. She had been a teacher, a reminder of resilience, trust, and courage. He realized that even brief encounters could leave lasting impressions, shaping thoughts, actions, and understanding in ways that time alone could not. The rancher spent the rest of the morning tending to his animals and the land, but his mind kept returning to Aita. Her words, her presence, and her quiet strength lingered in his thoughts. He found himself more observant, more aware of the small details in life, and more appreciative of the connections he often took for granted. By midday, he knew that the experience had changed him. The night and the morning had been a lesson in trust, courage, and human connection. He felt a sense of responsibility, not just to remember the lesson, but to carry it forward in his interactions with others. Even as he worked, the image of Aita walking down the trail stayed with him. He imagined the challenges she would face, the paths she would take, and the courage she would continue to show. He hoped, in some small way, that his home had provided her with a moment of safety, a brief pause in a life of travel and vigilance. The rancher realized that life was full of moments like these, moments that seemed small but carried profound meaning. A single night, a few conversations, a shared meal, and the presence of someone brave and wise could leave a mark that lasted a lifetime. And so he continued his day, tending to the land, caring for the animals, and carrying in his heart the quiet lessons of the night and morning. Aita's visit had been brief, but it had opened his eyes to a larger world, a world where courage, trust, and understanding could cross boundaries, cultures, and paths, leaving lasting impressions on those willing to listen and observe. By evening, he found himself looking toward the horizon, wondering where Aita had gone, hoping she was safe, and reflecting on the remarkable connection they had shared. The experience had reminded him that life's lessons often come in unexpected ways, and that true courage and understanding are not measured by time, but by the depth of connection and trust we are willing to offer and receive. The rancher's mind was far from still. He moved through his chores automatically, feeding the horses, checking fences, and tending the land. Yet his thoughts kept drifting to Aita. Where had she gone? Was she safe on the road? Had she reached a place where she could rest again without fear? The memory of the night they had spent together and the quiet morning they had shared weighed heavily on him. It was strange how someone could arrive unexpectedly, stay for such a short time, and leave a lasting impression that changed the way he saw the world. He realized that trust, even for a few hours, could open doors that were otherwise closed. By midday, he found himself walking to the edge of the property, gazing down the dirt trail that led away from his home. He could almost imagine her walking along it, carrying her small leather bag, moving steadily with determination. She had faced unknown challenges before, and she would face many more, but somehow he felt confident that she had the strength to handle them. A few neighbors stopped by to check on him, curious about his early morning wandering. He smiled politely and explained that he had a visitor, though he didn't go into details. He felt protective of Aita, even though she was no longer there. The thought of sharing her story fully felt like it would diminish the experience, like telling someone about a dream that should remain sacred. As the day went on, he reflected on the lessons the brief encounter had taught him. He thought about her courage, the quiet way she moved through the world, and the wisdom she carried from her community. There was a simplicity in her strength that he found inspiring. She had nothing material to offer, yet she left an imprint that would last a lifetime. In the afternoon, he wandered to a nearby hill to watch the sunset. The sky was painted with shades of orange, pink, and purple, and the wind carried the faint scent of wildflowers. He imagined Aita here too, resting after a long day of travel. Perhaps she had found a safe place to sleep, or perhaps she was still moving cautiously along the trail, alert and aware, as she always was. He realized that part of him wanted her to return, but another part knew that she could not stay. Life for her was about moving forward, facing challenges, and carrying responsibility for her people and herself. Her path was not meant to be tied to his ranch, but the impact she had made would remain with him forever. That evening, he prepared a simple dinner and ate quietly, thinking about the conversations they had shared. He remembered her words about courage, about moving forward despite fear, and about the small yet powerful lessons learned in fleeting moments of connection. He understood now that these lessons were not just hers. They applied to his own life, his own decisions, and the way he treated the world around him. Later, as darkness fell over the ranch, he lit a small lamp and sat quietly by the window. The stars were bright and clear, reflecting in his eyes as he thought about the night and morning he had shared with Aita. He realized that while the world could be unpredictable, there was always the potential for trust, understanding, and meaningful connection. Suddenly, a sound from the distance caught his attention, a faint whistle, carried by the wind. His heart skipped a beat. Could it be her? He quickly rose and moved to the edge of the property, scanning the horizon. There was no one there, only the gentle sway of trees and the distant mountains. Yet the sound lingered in his mind, a reminder that the connections we make are never truly gone, even when people leave our sight. He thought about the lessons she had shared: trust in oneself, courage in the face of uncertainty, and the importance of understanding others without judgment. He knew now that he would carry these lessons into his work, his relationships, and every day that followed. Aita's visit had been brief, but it had opened his eyes to a deeper understanding of life and human connection. The next morning, he returned to his usual routines, But everything felt slightly different. Feeding the animals, checking fences, and tending to the fields now carried a new awareness. He noticed small details he had once overlooked. The way the light fell on the grass, the sound of the wind through the trees, and the subtle interactions among the animals. Life, he realized, was full of these small but meaningful moments, and it was up to him to recognize them. Days turned into weeks, and the memory of Aita remained vivid. He thought about her often, wondering where her journey had taken her and whether she had found safety and peace. He hoped she remembered their time together as fondly as he did, and he imagined her sharing her wisdom with others along her travels. One evening, while repairing a fence near the edge of the property, he noticed a small bird perched on a post, singing a soft and cheerful tune. He smiled, feeling a sense of hope and continuity. Life moved forward, and the lessons he had learned from Aita continued to shape his perspective. Courage, trust, and understanding were not fleeting. They were lasting qualities that could guide him in every interaction and decision. The rancher realized that the most profound connections often come without warning. Sometimes a single night with a stranger could teach more than years of routine and familiarity. He understood now that human connections, even brief ones, could leave an enduring impact that shaped thoughts, actions, and hearts. As the months passed, he continued his life on the ranch, but with a renewed sense of awareness. He approached each day with patience, observation, and a quiet appreciation for the people and moments that crossed his path. Aita's visit had reminded him that life was full of unexpected lessons, and that every encounter, no matter how brief, held the potential to teach, inspire, and change a person. One late afternoon, while sitting by the window and watching the sunlight play across the fields, he reflected on the journey he and Aita had shared. He thought about her courage, her wisdom, and the trust she had placed in him. The memory was clear and vivid, a reminder that life often presents opportunities to learn from others in the most unexpected ways. He knew that he might never see Aita again, and yet he felt a quiet satisfaction. The night they had spent together, the conversations, the shared understanding, and the trust they had built were enough. They had connected in a way that transcended time, place, and circumstance, and that connection had left an enduring mark on him, shaping the way he viewed the world and the people in it. As darkness fell once more over the rancher stood at the edge of the property, looking toward the distant mountains. The wind carried the faint scent of wildflowers and the memories of a night that had changed him. He whispered quietly to himself, "Thank you," knowing that the lessons of trust, courage, and understanding were gifts he would carry forever. And in the quiet of that night, he felt a sense of peace. Life was unpredictable, and the future uncertain, but he had learned that even brief moments of connection could bring lasting wisdom. Aita's visit had been short, yet it had opened a door to understanding, courage, and trust that would remain with him for the rest of his life. He returned to the warmth of his home, tending to the animals and preparing for the evening, but the memory of Aita lingered. It was a gentle presence, a reminder that the world was vast, full of unknown paths, and yet filled with opportunities to trust, connect, and learn. He smiled, feeling grateful for the brief but meaningful encounter that had touched his life in ways he would never forget. The rancher knew now that life often brings lessons in the most unexpected forms. A single night with a stranger, a quiet morning, and shared understanding could teach more than years of routine ever could. And as he looked toward the stars that night, he silently wished for Aita's safety and happiness, knowing that their paths had crossed for a reason, and that the lessons of trust, courage, and connection would guide him in every step he took moving forward.